Hello and welcome back to the OddsNow YouTube channel for the latest edition of our Premier League betting show, hosted by myself, Matt Hill, and my co-host Brad Walker. We're back at it, and another international break on the horizon. This is the last set of fixtures before a 2-week break in the English top flight. So hopefully we're on hand to give you a little bit of insight ahead of the upcoming slate and point you in the direction of a few winners. Now, we did have some good picks last week, but we also had some near misses. And all in all, it was a losing week, which is a disappointing outcome under any circumstances. But I'm going to give Brad some credit here. Uh, Possibly the most painful loser I've ever seen. He put up over 10.5 corners in Ipswich versus Aston Villa. Ipswich got 10 corners by themselves. And you know what happened to Aston Villa? Didn't get a single one. Brad, that is a bit of a sickness of one to take.
You can't write it. I'm used to it at this point now, and the football gods clearly aren't a fan of me because that's happened a few times this season. So what can you do?
Yeah, I was looking back. I think that's 3 corner bets you've put up, and they've all been on the line, missing by one. So yeah, painful stuff. I did at least finish on a good note with Spurs to beat Man United 15-8. They absolutely battered them, didn't they? Always rely on Man United to dig you out of a hole with a dreadful performance. Okay, so if you've never watched the Premier League betting show, well, this is how it works. It's very simple. We run through the 10 games, alternating between myself and Brad, giving you a little bit of an oversight of both games, and then picking a best bet if we have one. So we're going to start with me this week. The early kickoff comes from Selhurst Park. It's Crystal Palace taking on Liverpool. And wow, two teams that have had very contrasting starts to the season. Palace, having ended the season so well last year under Oliver Glasner, well, hopes were high coming into 24-25, but they're still looking for their first win. They've drawn 3 and lost 3 of their opening 6 games. They would have had high hopes going into last week's clash with fellow strugglers Everton, and they took the lead through Mark Gahey, only to be pinned back by a Dwight McNeil brace and lose that one. That was a painful defeat. And would you think the first victory is coming this weekend? Well, probably not, because they take on a record-breaking Liverpool side. Yeah, Arne Slot's team winning against Bologna midweek in the Champions League means that Slot has now won 8 of his first 9 games in charge of the Reds. That is a record-breaking start for any Liverpool manager, so he's got to be delighted with the way he's settled into life on Merseyside. And I think it's fair to say that they haven't been dominating teams like they did sometimes under Jurgen Klopp, but generally their game management has really impressed me. The way they've closed these matches out with a minimum of fuss, and all of their forwards seem to be in fine form, which is a dangerous cocktail when you have the likes of Diaz, Nunes, Salah, Jota, Gakpo, et al. So it is a confident Liverpool side that turn up to Crystal Palace. They've got a good record here in recent years, having had some nights to forget against Palace in more going back a little bit longer. I won't remind you of them, Brad, as a Liverpool fan. But I suppose the only word of warning I would have with Liverpool going into this one would be potential fatigue with the Champions League. Obviously, played on Wednesday against Bologna, now have the early kickoff on Saturday. That was something that Mr. Klopp liked to make a little bit of a moan about during his time in charge. Of course, they were at home, so they haven't had the travelling aspect, but it is a little bit of a quick turnaround, I suppose. So I would play with a little bit of caution there, but Liverpool 1-2 to win this match. I think I can only really see Liverpool winning this match on all we've seen from both sides, but I don't want to be getting involved in an away team at 1-2. So I've decided to add a little bit of value there to play Liverpool to win with under 4.5 goals in the match. And remarkably, that is even money with Coral and Ladbrokes. So doubling your money if that comes in. All of Liverpool's games in the Premier League this season have been under 4.5 goals. So even though they've been winning games comfortably, they haven't been running up cricket scores. And that also covers you if Palace do score that a Liverpool 2-1 win or a 3-1 win in this particular scenario would still give you a winner. So even money, that's the way I'm going to play at the early kickoff. It's over to Brad for Arsenal at home to Southampton.
Yeah, Arsenal hosting here again as they did last week, Matt, against Leicester. They returned to winning ways following a draw with Manchester City, of course, a couple of weeks ago. But they did leave it late last weekend. They initially led 2-0 at half-time against the Foxes. I think everyone was almost preparing for a bruising afternoon for Steve Cooper's side. But they did pull it back to 2-2 Leicester. They looked as though they were going to take a point from a fixture that no one really gave them a chance of getting anything from, only for a late and Wilfred Ndidi own goal to restore Arsenal's lead before Kai Havertz got them over the line fully in the dying stages in the capital. I'm sure it's a huge confidence boost for Arsenal to win in that way. They had a lot of late winners last season and the season before, as they've begun to announce themselves in the title picture over the last couple of seasons. But they do have some injuries to the squad. Ødegaard and Zinchenko are still out, and I think there are questions around fullbacks, Jurriën Timber and Ben White as well, both of whom are being assessed. But of course, Arsenal still huge favourites at 1-7 to pick up another victory this weekend against a pretty dismal Southampton side so far. They've only got 1 point to their name after 6 matches, Russell Martin's side, and been alarming at both ends, I think it's fair to say, with 3 goals scored after 6 and 12 conceded already. 3 of those conceded came at Bournemouth on Monday. They were outclassed in the first half. They found themselves 3-0 down. They did manage to pull one back, but ultimately still came out on the losing side, which is the game kind of the story of their season. Southampton, they had 60% possession down at the Vitality. They've averaged 61% all season across those 6 games so far, but they've struggled converting that into results. I think there have been a lot of comparisons before a ball was kicked with Burnley from last season, and those have continued, I think, as the weeks have gone by, and there's questions over whether there's a need to change their approach. And maybe accused of being a little bit naive to think that that approach can work as it did in the Championship last season. This isn't going to be one of the games which Southampton are going to be judged by ultimately against Arsenal. It's almost a free hit for them. They're not expected to get anything, as was the case with Leicester last weekend. But there is mounting pressure on Russell Martin's side to get results now. Like I said, this is the 7th game of the Premier League season. We're starting to really get into the swing of things now. And like I said, Arsenal are strong favourites, and so there's not much value in backing the home team. So I am going to go down the player prop line. Midfielder Flynn Downs, I think he's brought in from West Ham in the summer, has been booked in Southampton's last 2 Premier League matches. He's been booked 3 times already this season in total, with both sides wanting to control the ball. I think Arsenal have averaged 55% possession at home in their matches at the Emirates so far. I think there could be a bit of a battle in midfield to retain control of the game. It could be a competitive area of the pitch, as it always is at the highest level. And I think, Flynn Downs to be shown a card any time at 15-8 generally looks like a nice little bet there, which could come in. Like I said, he's been booked in Southampton's last 2 league matches, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him pick up a 3rd booking in a row in this one.
Yeah, Flynn Downs, yellow card for Brad at Arsenal versus Southampton. Back to me for Brentford versus Wolves. And this has got the look of a big game for the away side here, who've had a dismal start to the season. Just 1 point from their opening 6 games for Wolves, and Gary O'Neill under mounting pressure is something that we've covered on the last couple of shows. That a tough run of fixtures, it should be said, for Wolves. They've had a tough start to the season. They've taken on the likes of Liverpool, Aston Villa and Arsenal, ultimately coming up short. In some of those games, they've actually taken the lead and given good accounts of themselves, but unfortunately haven't been able to capitalise. I think it's fair to say against Liverpool last weekend, they were quite comprehensively outplayed, even if the scoreline suggested otherwise. And it's got to be worrying for Gary O'Neill, because although you lose those matches and you don't lose too much credit from the bank, it puts extra pressure on this kind of game against a Brentford. Maybe if they'd made a better start to the season, a point here would be feeling acceptable. But I think they probably need to go and win this, particularly when I look at their first game after the international break, which is Manchester City. So you do really need to get points on the board as quickly as you can if you are Wolves. It's not going to be easy, though, against a Brentford team who have been very impressive on the whole, especially at home. They drew with West Ham last time out, but I think it's fair to say they had the better of that game. And I think that there'll be no soft touches against Wolves here. It's quite ironic, really. Brentford were always considered a little bit of a one-man band with Ivan Toney's departure, and in many ways they've stayed the same way with Brian Mbeumo stepping up to the plate. He is right among the top scorers in the Premier League, alongside the likes of Luis Diaz and Erling Haaland at the top of the scoring chart. He has 5 goals already, and he's getting a little bit of a taste for scoring in the first minute, isn't he? He's done that in back-to-back weeks now against Tottenham and against West Ham, both times some beautiful sort of acrobatic finishes as well. And he's a player in form and a great player to watch. Now, in terms of this particular game, I think Brentford are at quite a fair price to win this match, just floating around that even money. However, I am a little bit cautious to play it that way because it's such an important game for Wolves, and I do think they'll put a lot of emphasis on getting a result here. So I tried to have a little look into alternative angles, and I found myself playing the corner market. Brentford's corner statistics this season have been extremely encouraging. In their recent games, they've had tallies of 10, 12, 13, 13, 13, and 15. So when I looked even deeper into it, who scored have some interesting stats about where teams play, have the bulk of their possession on the pitch. And Brentford and Wolves are two of the widest playing teams in the league. They both have 75% of their possession out on the flanks and only 25% in the middle, which puts them in the bottom 4 or 5 in the Premier League. So all things considered, we're going to see the ball out wide a lot. We know that Brentford games do generally produce a lot of corners, and Wolves are quite privy to a corner themselves. So the line is set at 10.5. Over 10.5 is even money. As I say, that's coming in 5 of Brentford's 6 Premier League games this season. And then I'm also going to have a little tickle on over 12.5 as well, which has come in 4 of Brentford's 6 games. That is a very generous 13-5. Both of those bets with Betfair. So over 10.5 and over 12.5 corners in this one for me. Back to Brad for Leicester, who are at home to Bournemouth. Big game for the Foxes.
Yeah, Matt, I touched on Leicester there with their performance at Arsenal last week. That result leaves them with 3 draws and 3 losses now to their name in their first 6. They'd have been disappointing to lose so late at Arsenal, but I'm sure they can take confidence from the performance. In terms of their home fixtures, which is where they'll be this weekend, of course, 2 of those 3 matches at the King Power this season have ended in draws against Tottenham and Everton. But they do face an impressive-looking Bournemouth side here. Who ended their 2-game losing run versus Southampton, as I touched upon on Monday. Before that, they'd lost 1-0 to Chelsea in a game which they could have got something from, to be honest. They were probably the better side. And also they were outclassed in a 3-0 loss to Liverpool the week prior to that Southampton game. So they'd be absolutely buzzing, I'm sure, to return to winning ways in that game. They'd have been over the moon, as well, to see their new striker, Evan Nielsen, get off the mark. And with his first goal at the Vitality, I think he opened the scoring in that Southampton game. Of course, he replaced Dominic Solanke, didn't he, who vacated for Tottenham in the summer. He's now got a goal under his belt, so I'm sure he'll be chuffed to get off the mark and may fancy his chances, of adding to his tally against Leicester in this game, who have already conceded 12 goals already. I think goals have been the factor in general in the Foxes matches so far this season, and that probably explains the route I'm going to go with my best bet. Both teams have scored in all six of Leicester's Premier League games so far this season, and both teams have scored in 4 of Bournemouth's 6 Premier League games as well. So that makes sense to go down that route. I do think Bournemouth have the added quality out of the 2, particularly in forward areas. Look at the form of Antoine Semenyo, who I think he got a goal and assist in that Southampton game. He's been brilliant for them. Mentioned Evan Nielsen getting off the line. They've got off the mark. They've got a few good players in those forward areas. So I'm going to go with Bournemouth to win and both teams to score here. That comes in at 11-4. Generally, Leicester, like Wolves, you said there, Matt, they need a win. They've still not won any of their first 6 games, and it looks increasingly likely that they're going to be involved in a relegation dogfight at the end of the season. I think we were all expecting that anyway. They were boosted, of course, a couple of weeks ago by the news that they won't be handed a points deduction for PSR breaches, at least for now anyway. I'm sure there's appeal. I don't know whether there's an appeal on the way with that, but they might not be completely out of the woods there. But yeah, they need a win. I just can't see them getting it here, but I do think both teams will score when you look at the record of both sides so far in this campaign. So that's the area I'll be going there, Matt, 11-4 generally across the board. I think there's plenty of value at that price.
Brilliant. Bournemouth and both teams to score then for Brad in that trip to Leicester for the Cherries. Manchester City, the champions, at home to Fulham after disappointing draws back-to-back, haven't they now? Arsenal, we all know about that game. And then their first Rodri-less fixture was a trip to Newcastle last weekend, which finished in a 1-1 draw. City got their noses in front with Josko Gvardiol, but then were pinned back by an Anthony Gordon penalty. And to be honest, Newcastle maybe could have snatched all 3. They had a penalty appeal for Joe Linton late on, which looked 50-50 to me. City a little bit sluggish. Of course, they have bounced back since in midweek with a very comfortable win over Slovan Bratislava in the Champions League. It'd be interesting to see if Ilkay Gundogan features in this one against Fulham. Pep Guardiola described his performance against Newcastle as the worst he's performed for 8 or 9 years. Quite dramatic. Quite dramatic to think that he could have watched every game Gundogan's played for the last 8 or 9 years. But with Guardiola, I wouldn't put it past him, to be fair. But obviously, problems to solve with Rodri being out of the side, among others as well. I don't think City are fully firing on all cylinders yet this term, but we do associate them with being quite slow starters, and they always finish strong, don't they? So reluctant to take them on too much. Fulham have made an excellent start to the season, though, it should be said, and I've been particularly impressed with some of their new signings. But Raul Jimenez is a feel-good story. Obviously, such a exciting striker during his Wolves days before sustaining that horrific head injury, which seemingly had ruined his career. He's never really looked the same player, but really good to see him back amongst the goals. And I think a lot of us would have thought Rodrigo Muniz was going to be the goal-scoring man for Fulham this year, but actually it's Jimenez who's been finding the back of the net more regularly for them. But I think their standout man has been Emile Smith-Rowe, hasn't he? He's just looked electric. Really nice to see him playing every week, having left boyhood club Arsenal, and he just seems to be thriving for it. Looks like a great pickup. You do wonder how long Fulham will be able to keep hold of him. But in terms of the head-to-head records of these sides, my goodness, I got a shock when I read this. Man City have won the last 16 meetings in all competitions. It goes back 12 years. So Fulham haven't even had a point off them in the last decade. That is a remarkably bad run for a team of Fulham's calibre as well. And last year, they were absolutely smashed 4-1 and 5-0. However, what I would say is I think the gap between these two teams compared with last season has probably narrowed. Fulham are in a better place than they were 12 months ago. And I think Man City, due to the current situation with injuries, are probably in a worse place. Is that enough to turn this fixture on its head? Well, probably not for me, because I think all the evidence suggests that when Marco Silva comes up against Pep Guardiola, he generally just comes up a little bit short tactically, and has obviously a lesser calibre of players to work with. There's nothing to make me think that Silva is going to register his first win over Pep with Fulham here. So the way to play it, I ended up landing on a similar way to what I'm playing the Liverpool game. Manchester City to win this one with under 4.5 goals in the match is a safe but solid 8-11, and I would think this is the kind of bet that you could be including on your accumulators and your multiples. Really, it gives you so many correct outcomes that would make this bet land. Anything like a 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1. 3-0 win for City. So many possibilities there. You do feel like at home in particular, with the way Erling Haaland tends to play at the Etihad, that they'll have too much for Fulham, but a Fulham side who can maybe cause them a couple of problems. So City and under 4.5 goals in the match, 8-11 with Betway is my selection there. Brad, the last of the Saturday 3 p.m.s is West Ham at home to Ipswich.
Yeah, we'll start off with the home side, West Ham. Matt, Julian Lopetegui's reign, I think it's fair to say, has not got off to the best start. Their 1-0 draw at Brentford last time out in the league leaves them with just 5 points taken from their first 6 matches. They did have a higher expected goals tally in that game, 0.99, albeit, compared to Brentford's 0.37. But they couldn't take the chances they created, and they were left with a point. I think they'll particularly be concerned by their home form this season in the league. They've lost all 3 home fixtures so far at the London Stadium. Admittedly, they faced some difficult sides there in Man City, Chelsea, and Aston Villa. But the amount of chances they conceded is a huge concern for Lopetegui. I'm sure they've averaged 1.7 expected goals against across those 3 matches, and they welcome an Ipswich side who are now unbeaten in their last 4 in the league, albeit they've all ended in the draw. But a great point was picked up last week at home to Aston Villa. They battled back to tie the game at 2-2 after initially trailing 2-1. I think Liam Delap as well got a brace, didn't he? He got himself off the mark in the league with 2 goals there. I'm sure Kieran McKenna now will be eager to land his first Premier League win since they got promoted to the top flight. It could be a good measuring stick, really, to see where they are against, like I said, a struggling West Ham side, particularly at home. I've mentioned the chances conceded by West Ham at home. Their last 3 strikers to play against them have all scored, incidentally. Jimenez, who you touched upon there for Fulham, Jackson, who scored twice for Chelsea in their 3-0 win recently, and Brian Mbeumo for Brentford last week. Liam Delap, who I touched on there, who got those 2 goals. He comes in, evens to have at least 1 shot on target. So over 0.5 plus shots on target for Liam Delap comes in at evens generally. I think his confidence will be sky high after those 2 goals last weekend, and anytime goal scorers where you can get them at 16-5. Combining all that with West Ham's, like I said, their record at home, they've conceded 50 shots at home already in those 3 games. I'll certainly be banking on him at least to get 1 shot on target. So that's my main bet from this game at evens, 0.5 shots on target, evens for Liam Delap, but it might even be worth dropping a few quid as well. I need to find the back of the net again at 16-5. I think it's a very generous price against the West Ham side, who are really, really struggling at the minute, particularly in front of their own fans.
Yeah, I like it. Liam Delap, son of Rory, who you may remember for throwing the ball extremely far into penalty boxes. And he was also, of course, as everyone will know, from the Carlisle United Academy. Well, I thought I'd drop that in whilst I could. Very rare, tenuous link there for the Premier League betting show. I'll move on to the late kickoff, which is Everton at home to Newcastle. Interesting game, this one, because Everton should be full of confidence, shouldn't they, after finally getting that first win of the season. They fell behind against Crystal Palace, but they didn't panic, and a brace from Dwight McNeil got them up and running for the season. Generally, as I predicted on last week's Premier League betting show, that things may improve at Goodison Park over the coming weeks due to some more generous fixtures and due to things going on off the pitch. That is seemingly how it's going. There seems to be good noises over the Everton takeover and what rumours of a big budget to spend, which amazes me given their masses of debt that they supposedly have. But there we go. And traditionally with Everton, a big budget doesn't necessarily mean good players arriving. So Sean Dyche was taking it all with a pinch of salt when a reporter asked him about it. Said he would just deal with what he actually ends up being a fact rather than rumour. So we shall see. But generally, the mood feels better around Everton. Newcastle also come in with their tails up, having made a sluggish start to the season, but then a great point against Manchester City. And I do always feel with this Newcastle side that the big games bring the best out of them, I think, particularly on their own turf. And Anthony Gordon was brilliant last week. That's the form that we've come to expect from him, isn't it? That's the form that's got him into the England squad. And really pleased to see him up and firing and playing his best stuff for Newcastle. I think this is a tough game for them, and a lot of people will be surprised to hear this, but last year when these two teams met, Everton actually took 4 points off Newcastle. They won 3-0 convincingly at Goodison Park and drew 1-1 up at St James's thanks to a late Dominic Calvert-Lewin penalty. And there's no reason why Everton can't do the same again. I was really surprised by Sean Dyche's record against Eddie Howe. When I had a little look, I always have a look at the managerial head-to-heads if managers have played each other more than once. And wow, Sean Dyche, out of all the managers, and there are many that he has faced 10 or more times in his career, he has the best points per game ratio against Eddie Howe out of all of them. He takes 1.75 points per game off Eddie Howe teams. He's won 8, drawn 4, lost 4. Now, bear in mind that he's been with Burnley and Everton in that period. He's not exactly been with powerhouses. So clearly Howe, who plays a sort of possession-friendly attacking style of football, generally finds himself nullified by Dyche teams. And I think that gives real cause for the Everton win here, which is still north of 2-1. And that would appeal to many, but I think I've found an even bigger price that I want to be with. I mentioned him a little bit earlier, Dwight McNeil scoring both goals against Crystal Palace. And he's been a little bit of a revelation in the last few weeks. Traditionally someone we associate very much with being an out-and-out winger, dancing down the flank and trying to cut in and trying to get crosses in the box, a traditional winger, if you will. Well, kind of by force of options, he's been shuffled into an attacking midfield role in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and with great success as well. Got an assist against Bournemouth, a goal and an assist against Aston Villa, and then a brace against Crystal Palace. So it seems to have rejuvenated McNeil, and he's finally adding goals to his game. No, don't forget, this is a man 3 seasons ago who played all 38 games for Burnley and didn't score a single goal. And he's scored 3 in his last 3 appearances and chucked in a couple of assists for good measure. So he's banging form. Confidence is high. He's going to be playing attacking midfield once again here. And I was really surprised to see quotes of 4-1 about him scoring any time, particularly after he comes off the back of 2 goals last weekend. So that's the way I'm going to play this one. Dwight McNeil to continue his scoring streak. And just to give you a little bit more of a boost of confidence in this bet, McNeil, as I say, he doesn't score very often. He scored against Newcastle last season and he scored against Newcastle the season before as well. So he's looking to score against Newcastle for a 3rd straight season. And at 4-1, I think that is my favourite bet of the weekend. Brad, on to Sunday. You're going to start us off with a big looking game for Manchester United. I say this every week, don't I? But they are away at Aston Villa. Eric Ten Hag, dead man walking?
It looks that way, doesn't it? He might have just bought himself another week for Harry Maguire's late equaliser, in Porto last night. But I'll come on to them in a minute.
Fans of other Premier League teams rejoiced as that Harry Maguire goal went in.
No comment from me, the Liverpool fan. I'm gutted to see it the way they are. No, I'll start off with Aston Villa. You hinted it there, Matt. The form of both of these sides couldn't really be any different. They're riding the crest of a wave, but they've been brilliant now for a long period of time under Unai Emery. But they picked up an historic 1-0 victory against Bayern Munich at home on Wednesday. It means they've now taken 6 points from 6 from their first 2 Champions League matches this season. When you combine that with their league form, it really does make for impressive reading. They've won 4 of their first 6 in the Premier League, drawing once and losing once in those other games. They would have been disappointed, as I said, to drop points against Ipswich last weekend. That was, of course, the first time they've drawn in the league this season. But overall, they've got to be satisfied with the start they've made to the campaign. They also boast 2 of the most informed strikers in the league too, in Ollie Watkins and John Duran, who have combined for 8 goals in the Premier League already. Duran struck that winner against Bayern in midweek and is in red-hot form. You've got to feel sorry for him, really. Pretty much any other side that isn't Aston Villa and Manchester City, he's probably starting every week now, but he's also happens to be playing with another informed striker in Ollie Watkins too. So a little bit of sympathy from John Duran there, but he's certainly one of the best substitutes in the Premier League this season, I think it's fair to say. And we'll move on to Man United. I think it's a bit of an understatement to say it's been a dismal start to their new campaign. It's shock horror, really, when you tell a manager you don't really want him, but you couldn't find any other options, so you wanted to stay around. It doesn't tend to bring positive results. I would have seen that coming. I don't know. But as you touched upon, I think earlier on the video, Matt, they got absolutely battered against Tottenham last week. It's probably not the worst result under Ten Hag, because they did lose 7-0 at Anfield a couple years ago. But I think it's by far their worst performance. And I say that because the first 35 minutes of that game versus Liverpool a couple of seasons ago, it was competitive. I think it was 0-0. I think Cody Gakpo opened the score shortly before half-time. And then 6 of those 7 Liverpool goals came in the second half. But against Tottenham, they were second best from minute 1. Bruno Fernandes, of course, was sent off in the latter stages of the first half. A questionable red card. I don't think it has been rescinded. I think now. I think it's been overturned, rightly so. I don't think he should have been sent off for that. But I don't think you can say it had any bearing on the game either. It was only heading in one direction, and before that decision came, the amount of chances they conceded in that match and in general is staggering. They've changed personnel at the back with the likes of Matthijs de Ligt and Mesraoui coming in. It's not really made that much of a difference. De Ligt was heralded as a saver at Old Trafford, but I think you've got to question why the likes of Juventus and Bayern were willing to let him go to begin with. And you put all that together, I'm going to back a comfortable home win this weekend in what could be Erik Ten Hag's last game in charge with the international break coming. The timing could just be ideal for the club to make a change. Probably Van Nistelrooy will find his way into the dugout, but we'll focus on that when it comes. Anyone who watched the game against Tottenham last week could see the golfing class from the very start. As I said, it was a bizarre performance. And against Porto as well. Last night in the Europa League, they find themselves 2-0 up. You think, right, they're going to get themselves back on track again. Is Ten Hag going to survive once again? And then they end up throwing that 2-0 lead away and find themselves 3-2 down heading into stoppage time. Harry Maguire does come on in a bizarre substitution, to be honest with you, but Ten Hag can probably hold his hands up and say it worked because he did get that equaliser. But still, I think it's papering over the cracks, to say the least. And as I said, they face a buoyant Aston Villa side, who's probably one of the worst opponents you could face right now with the momentum they've built up. If you look at Villa's home fixtures this season, they've played twice in the league at Villa Park, and they scored 3 goals in each of them. And I'm going to back them to do the same here against a pretty poor Man United side. So Aston Villa to score 2.5 plus goals comes in at 3-1 generally. Yeah, I'm going to back them to win again, Matt, and I'm going to back them to win in style and compound the woes of Ten Hag and Man United. May even put the Dutchman out of his misery in the dugout.
Yeah, and put another Dutchman in misery in Ruud van Nistelrooy, as you say. We'll see. But yeah, it's very hard to make a case for Manchester United, and they often look a bit rudderless tactically to me. They're coming up against maybe the best tactician in the world, one of in Unai Emery. Yes, we shall see. Big Aston Villa goal frenzy for Brad in that one. My last game comes from Sunday as well. Chelsea at home to Nottingham Forest, and quite simply, I want to be with Chelsea in this one because I've been very impressed with them in the last few weeks. They've now won 5 straight in all competitions, and it's just been a team that we've just criticised constantly over the last 2 years for their decisions on and off the pitch. Ran more as a sort of tax dodging, loopholing business than a football club, I think it's fair to say. And it just always felt like what was on the pitch was sort of second most important to Todd Boehly, and yeah, you're worried about the direction Chelsea were going in. And Enzo Maresca's appointment questioned by almost everybody universally, I think. But it's time to give him some credit. I know you did last week, Brad. I'm going to double down and say he's doing a great job now, and he really is. And some of these games, yes, it's against opponents they should be beating, but they haven't been beating those kind of opponents for the last 2 years. So now they're getting back to more like what we would expect from this Chelsea side. And we all know winning breeds confidence. Winning 5 straight is always going to breed confidence. And more relevant to me is the amount of goals they've been scoring in these games more recently. They've scored 16 goals in their last 4 games. You now have multiple players leading the charge in terms of goals. Christopher Nkunku, who there was a lot of hope around when he first signed, but he sustained a really bad injury which completely ruined his first season at Stamford Bridge. Well, he's only been kind of used as a fringe player thus far, but he keeps finding the back of the net, and you think it's only a matter of time before he becomes their kind of number one striker. In behind him, you have Cole Palmer running absolute riot, scored 4 in the first half last weekend, first player ever to do that in Premier League history. So all signs are good for Chelsea. Nottingham Forest, on the other hand, well, I thought they made a really encouraging start to the season, actually, but I did touch on this in one of the previous Premier League betting shows. They had quite a kind start in terms of the fixture list. They needed to make the most of it, and they have. But in the last couple of weeks, I think their performances have been a little bit more concerning. They had a 2-2 draw with Brighton, where I think they were probably a little bit fortunate to get that draw. And then last week, losing at home to Fulham, that's a disappointing result for them. Losing at home for Forest is always going to be painful because traditionally, since the returns to the Premier League, their home ground has been their fortress. It's been the complete opposite so far this season, actually. They won away at Southampton 1-0 and away at Liverpool 1-0. But I don't have much faith in that away streak continuing here. I got to be honest. For all the reasons mentioned, I do think Chelsea will have too much for Forest here. I looked at different ways of playing this. Chelsea are quite short odds-on favourites, as you can imagine. But I talk about the goal and the confidence of the goals running through this team at the moment. Well, Chelsea to score in both halves is priced at odds against 11-10 with Betway. I can't really see that myself. 11-10 implies less than a 50% chance of Chelsea scoring in both halves. Well, I think you have a Forest team that are on a little bit of a decline at the moment, in a little bit of a rough moment and a sticky patch against a Chelsea team who have got their tails up, are really confident, goals coming from all areas. That just says to me that Chelsea, will continue. All signs are that that's going to continue this weekend. And I think 11-10 about Chelsea scoring in both halves. They've certainly been scoring plenty of early goals. I think they'll keep their foot on the gas here against Forest. Chelsea's scoring both halves 11-10. And that is actually available in a few different books as well as Betway. So we'll say generally 11-10 Chelsea scoring both halves against Forest. Brad, your last game of the weekend and our last game of the weekend is Brighton at home to Tottenham.
Yeah, you mentioned Chelsea there, Matt. Brighton suffered their first Premier League defeat under Fabian Hurtzler against Chelsea last weekend. 4-2 was the end result. Like you said, Cole Palmer scoring all 4 in the first half and the first player to ever do it. They've not won in their last 4 now, Brighton, though the 3 matches before Chelsea did all end in draws. And only one of their 14 Premier League, but having said that, only one of their 14 Premier League meetings with Spurs have ended in the draw. So whether that run will continue into this fixture remains to be seen. We've already touched on Tottenham and their remarkable performance against a pretty poor Man United side last weekend. I think overall there has been promise throughout Postecoglou's tenure, but they have struggled with inconsistency. So it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with Brighton this weekend. For example, last season they beat Aston Villa 4-0 away and then lost 3-0 to Fulham the next week. So yeah, we're still yet to be convinced, I think, that Tottenham can sustain their impressive form over a longer period. They also lost this fixture 4-2 last season, so they'll be looking to right that, I'm sure, this weekend. Heung-min Son, the captain, was out against United. I think he sat out of their Europa League win on Thursday too. I think he's being assessed ahead of this one, so we're still unsure whether he will feature. But one man who has stepped up in his absence is Brennan Johnson. He scored what turned out to be the winner in their 2-1 win at Ferencváros on Thursday in the Europa League. That's the 5th game in a row that he's now found the back of the net in, and he's already matched his total goal haul from last season for Tottenham. And he also scored against Brighton, last season at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in their 2-1 home win. So I'm going to keep it simple with this one. Stick up another player prop with Brennan Johnson to score any time at 11-4 generally going to back him to continue that run. He's been in brilliant form for them. It looks like he's finally finding his feet at the club. And yeah, Brighton, like I said, winners in the last 4 could be an ideal opponent for him to continue that run. So that's where I'll be going for the final game of the weekend, Matt.
Good stuff, Brad. And on that note, we will wrap it up with our best bets. Just going to bring them onto the screen now so that you can see where we're going. If I take that one off, there we go. So my best bets there. I won't read them all out to you because of course we've covered them in the show. What is my favourite bet of the weekend? Well, it's probably the biggest price on there, to be honest. Dwight McNeil. I think when a player's in form, it pays to just stick with them. Sometimes he's in the goal scoring form of his life, enjoying a new position. And Everton's recent record and his recent record against Newcastle makes that 4-1 about a goal anytime looking big. I think if I was really banking on one, I think doubling your money in the early kickoff with Liverpool and under 4.5 goals is probably the safest selection on there from me. Brad, what would be your favourite bet and your safest bet, please?
Favourite bet, I would say Villa to score 2.5 plus goals against United. I think they could really hammer them into the ground.
Literally will be your favourite bet as well, won't it? You'll be really enjoying watching that.
In many ways, that will be my favourite bet as a Liverpool fan. But yeah, I do have a feeling that they could really win well this weekend.
Yeah, I do. I see that.
The opposing form. Safest bet, I'd probably say the Liam Delap one, for all the reasons I explained further in the video. To have one shot on target, even money, like I said, against a West Ham side who have struggled at home, that looks, I think I'm probably going to be going for that myself, definitely.
Well, you could double the 2 safe bets into a 3-1 double if you were so inclined. So Liverpool and under 4.5 goals, Liam Delap to have a shot on target against West Ham is a 3-1 double. Hopefully we can land that one. We will recap how we perform here on next week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If that was your first Premier League betting show, please do consider letting us know who you're backing this weekend in the comments. Give us a follow on social media, OddsNow with __ on Twitter, OddsNow TV on TikTok, where we post our best bet in a little bit of a shorter format. And yeah, if you haven't already, please do press subscribe. We really appreciate you sticking around. And we've got loads going on the channel with other sports as well. So please do check out our other videos. We'll see you again very soon. Thanks for watching.